Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here. William Drummond, my friend, who runs the @SEC Baseball account, joins me. William, it's about to be, well, it is baseball-only season for the conference. Basketball out of the way other than the NIT, and this was kind of the weekend we targeted for it to start getting interesting, for us to be able to maybe start to reach, I'm not going to say conclusions, but get closer to that for some teams, at least have an idea of who's good and those sorts of things, and a fun weekend to watch when you weren't watching basketball, and some interesting stuff happened for sure.
Yeah, definitely felt like week 2 and week 3 is kind of when we're teetering on that. It's no longer projections. It's resume based. What have you done? Strength of schedule is kind of evening out. So great weekend. There was a lot of really good baseball played. I feel like we found out a good bit about a couple of teams, a couple of guys. So all in all, a pretty good weekend.
Well, I'll tell you, the team we really found out the most about, that was Tennessee. You didn't know until they played a really good team, especially on the road. And I thought Tennessee was good. Everything that I was looking at, I dived deep into numbers, looking at their hitters, their pitchers. Everything looked good, but you kind of wanted to see them do it against somebody else. And boy, Tennessee had one of the most impressive regular season weekends in SEC baseball that I remember in a while.
Yeah, they really did. I mean, when you going on the road and winning at number one is one thing. When you factor in it's one of the largest and most raucous crowds, they do it in absolute dominant fashion, sweep all three. And like you mentioned, it was kind of one of those. I think everybody thought Tennessee was good, pretty much knew it. But this was like the statement that was like, okay, how good are they? And they really proved it and then some. I know they had the weekend in Houston where they played Texas, lost to them, and then beat up on, I think it was Baylor and Oklahoma. And that's one of those, elite teams can have that weekend, and so can kind of just some ho-hum teams. So you couldn't base a ton off that. It was a good weekend, but nothing like what we saw this past weekend in Oxford.
I think the thing look, they're outstanding everywhere. Their lineup, 1 to 9, they all hit. Fielding might be a little bit of a concern. We'll wait and see. But I think the thing that's just astonished me is their pitching. I mean, we went into the season and we said, what is Tennessee's biggest question? We said, well, they've got him in the lineup because you're replacing Ferguson and Rucker and they turned over the catcher. They've got Evan Russell there now, too. I mean, they lost a lot. And the shortstop, too. The kid from Australia whose name escapes me. But one of the best 3 or 4 hitters in the league last year. And so you're
Liam Spence.
Thank you, Liam Spence.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it even more and going, okay, I don't know about their pitching. Blade Tidwell, and then behind him what? And then Tidwell's hurt. And then Halverson's hurt, and you're going, oh, boy.
Mm-hmm. I think you hit on something. Russell going to catcher. That's something that kind of gets overlooked because there were so many question marks on the mound and in the lineup. But I think they hit on that on one of the games on the broadcast. I think they were actually interviewing Vitello, and they even mentioned it to him, and he just talked about how that's hard to do. You don't have a lot of guys that it's one thing for a guy who's caught some. That's his secondary position. He hadn't spent much of any time behind the plate, and they throw him back there. And not only is he serviceable, he's pretty good. It's that's one of the things. I know some of the UT fans over the weekend on Twitter were bringing out the preseason rankings and stuff and poking fun. And I think everybody kind of had him in that same spot, not because they didn't think they had talent, but it's just okay, you're a new catcher, 3 new arms in the rotation that haven't done it before, and you're replacing all your production. That's pretty unheard of that all of that goes that smoothly, and you plug in dudes that are that good that can just from day one flip the switch and handle it all. That's really rare. That's surprising to say the least, but they're just so dominant. And you mentioned the offense is kind of what makes the highlights, all of that. We knew Ole Miss's pitching was a little shaky at times. Mm-hmm. Auburn scored a lot on them. But we also knew Ole Miss has a really good offense, and the UT Arms just shut them down. I think 7 runs over the weekend. that's loud no matter who you play, but against that offense, it's extremely loud.
Yeah, you say this is pretty unheard of. This is completely unheard of. I think Tennessee fans didn't understand, like, if you've watched college baseball a long time, you don't just pick up all those pieces and get back to where you are, much less be better. But so far, that's what they are. And, I mean, you got Chase Burns, who right now is a legit SEC Pitcher of the Year candidate. You got Drew Beam, who's given up less than 0.6 runners per inning. I think that's the best mark in the league. That's crazy. I mean, that's
and you're getting that out of your freshman guy on
your
Sunday.
Freshman 3 starter. I mean, Dollander's got a 45% strikeout rate. That's probably the best in the league. Like, Dollander probably statistically underneath the hood is their best pitcher. ERA-wise, he's not right now. I mean, their bullpen's good. I just don't know where to stop with these guys. And oh, by the way, Blade Tidwell was allegedly ready to throw if needed this weekend, which I could not be more astonished based on what I was hearing preseason.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have if you're Tony Vitello, but I don't know how you pull one of those other guys out of the rotation. It's probably one of those, first couple of times back, they're not going to throw him out there for 7 innings on game 1. They're going to ease him back into it. But once they do ease him back into it, I'm really curious to see what they do. I think it's one of those things. I can't remember who it was that mentioned this. I don't know if it was on Twitter. But Will Bednar wasn't 100% for Mississippi State to start the year last year. And then by the time you get him to the end of the year, he's a little bit fresher. He hasn't thrown as many innings as a lot of those starters had by the end of the year. So you could look at something similar for Tennessee, where they've got, a surefire guy ready to go at the back end of the year, especially with 2 freshmen who, we've seen a lot of really good freshmen, but they tend to hit that wall somewhere just when you log a lot of innings. So this will kind of help them have, just another really dominant arm, and one of those where you probably don't have to ride those freshmen as hard. So that way, when you do get to postseason, they haven't thrown, 100 pitches every weekend for the past 14 weekends. They're, you're managing their innings a little bit differently due to the depth you've got.
Well, I'm looking right now, among pitchers with a dozen innings or more, he's got the highest fly ball rate in the league, does Drew Beam. That's the place that he might end up going. I'm not saying Beam hasn't been good, but that's a little worrisome in that park where, you get a fly ball up in that place and it leaves in a hurry. And I've not seen him pitch enough to know if these are infield pop-ups or what they are, but that's the one to me that probably is going to make the most sense. I mean, Burns was potential first rounder a year ago, second rounder, so he's talented. Right. Dollander, again, I'll ride with that kind of strikeout rate all day. But I mean, these are these are first world problems, to say the least.
Yeah, they definitely are. And I know the Tennessee fans kind of had some fun on Twitter with, everybody just assumes that just because they're hitting home runs that it's because of the small park. And
their pitchers have to pitch in that environment too. That's the thing that people I don't think understand, and they're not giving up a lot of bombs. Yeah,
that's one of the things I was going to point out, and that park does play small, but that just goes to show how good they are. But I think it was Chris Burke last year in the regional broadcast. He kind of mentioned that the renovations are coming for Lindsey Nelson. That might be one of the things they look at because this lineup Tennessee's got, they're not getting cheated on home runs. They're earning those, but you don't want to find yourself in a postseason atmosphere where somebody hits a wall scraper that they got a little lucky on.
Yeah.
When you're a team that's routinely hosting games like that in the postseason, you're kind of confident in what you're able to do. You don't want to give anybody else any favors. So that is something probably to monitor, but to rate its going, I don't have any concerns yet.
Yeah. Well, what do we make of Ole Miss? Because, man, the pitching, I thought Ole Miss before the season might be the best team in the league because we knew about the lineup, right? And I think those guys are still good. But I just thought McDaniel, Diamond, some of those guys are 94, 95, 96. Another year in the league. You got a lot of guys in the bullpen that have been around. It just isn't happening for them so far. Gaddis is not pitching well now. I don't know what. I mean, I think surely this team gets better. And again, I mean, they got boat raced by Tennessee, which that's going to happen to a lot of teams this year, I think. But I expected more out of Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think the concern is pretty legitimate in terms of the starting arms. Um, Diamond did look decent on Sunday, given the stuff he's got is good.
Yeah.
Um, I thought he did a pretty serviceable job. The offense just didn't really bail him out. I do think that offense is probably better than they showed. They'll get Kevin Graham back in a couple of weeks, which will help not only from a production standpoint, but as kind of one of your core guys. Um, I think that offense probably felt like it got punched in the mouth a little bit. So, when there's guys that haven't batted yet and they're already down 6-0. It's
Yeah.
demoralizing. But I think the offense is good enough to carry them. But that's one of those, when you get in postseason play, you can't just out hit teams and expect to make an Omaha run. I do think they've got the talent to do it, but it's just a matter of do those guys settle in, or do those guys kind of press and kind of combust?
Yeah.
We'll see. I think Gaddis is good. I like Gaddis, but since they moved him, I think it was 1 inning and 6 runs. And it's just, like I said, the Tennessee offense is going to do that to a lot of people, but he didn't look the sharpest against Auburn necessarily either. I think he can settle in and figure that out, but it feels like they don't have like that true Friday guy that you might run into with some of those other teams in the league.
Biggest upset over the weekend, I would say, and there were a couple of them, but Vanderbilt goes into South Carolina, wins the Friday game 10-0, and ends up losing the last two. Will Sanders was really good for Carolina in game 2. Looked more like Will Sanders was expected to look. Vanderbilt made some curious lineup tinkers and started a true freshman who hadn't started a game yet. That went fine a time through the lineup, and then it didn't. And anyway, South Carolina's now beaten Vandy and Texas. The guy that really busted out for Carolina this weekend was Braylon Wimmer, who had 2 home runs in that 3 game, and that's his first 2 of the year. But he was really seeing it all weekend. And this, I don't know what to do with South Carolina yet. I really don't, because I think their schedule's been a lot tougher than anybody else's. Of course, they still don't have Julian Bosnick either. So if you're Vanderbilt, Tennessee, in my mind, this is the time to catch them. Tennessee took advantage of that, and Vanderbilt did not.
Yeah, that's kind of the most perplexing team in the league, if not the country at this point.
Yeah.
I think it was opening weekend or weekend 2. They barely squeak by. They get swept by Clemson. Then they go take 2 or 3 from Texas. And they get swept by Tennessee and take 2 or 3 from Vandy. And it's just kind of Jekyll and Hyde. You don't know what you're going to get. There is some talent there. Like you mentioned, Braylon Wimmer came out, hits 2 home runs, his first 2 of the season in a rubber game against, what was then the number 4 team in the country. That's pretty loud. Their Sunday guy, I believe his name's Becker. He's looked really good in his 3 outings. I think Texas was his first start. Looked decent against Tennessee too, and just kind of ran out of steam and turned over to the bullpen, and Tennessee eventually kind of put that one out. But he's been pretty good, and it's just you never know what you're going to get. If they get Bosnick back, that makes you feel a lot better about that team, because like you mentioned, they are doing this. They've already lost Hicks for the year. Bosnick hasn't thrown. So they're doing this without, their second and third best starters. So maybe that gives them a little stability moving forward. They've got probably 2 of the best series wins in the country. But outside of that,
probably no team has 2 better series wins than them. Yeah.
I'd say, Tennessee's over Ole Miss is up there. And then, other than that, I don't really know. Kentucky's had some good ones. But I don't know who else I would necessarily put over that. But they've got to be more consistent. Can you? Yeah. In the league, you're not going to be able to just kind of do flashes here and there, because you're going to go through 4 and 5 game spurts where you get it handed to you, and that's a difference maker. So we'll see what ends up happening. But you've got to be encouraged if you're a South Carolina fan. And then the flip side of Vandy. I still think I don't have any concerns over Vandy long term, but that's one of those, like, resume wise, like, you want that win. It is on the road. It's not the end of the world. But that's one of those you expected Vanderbilt to win. I saw something on social media today. Apparently, Christian Little was suspended.
He
That's why he didn't
was.
go.
Yeah, they announced that
I didn't know
today.
about that until after.
Yeah. I didn't know that either. That was a very well kept secret. That's one of their key arms
Mm-hmm.
coming this season. I mean, they still haven't started Patrick Riley yet. He's been great out of the bullpen. In fact, he struck out 14 out of the bullpen in that game 2 loss.
Lost. Yeah, that kind of got lost in the shuffle there. But 14 strikeouts is really good. 14 strikeouts in relief is it's hard to do.
Yeah.
He's been really sharp for them out of the bullpen. So I will be curious to see if they, just like having a surefire lockdown guy that they can go to, or if they, maybe eventually flip him back into the rotation, or how that works. I definitely think the depth on the mound there is something that's going to take them a long way. But it's kind of life in the SEC. Sometimes you're going to take one on the chin, even when you probably shouldn't.
Yeah, and they've got Nick Maldonado waiting out there too. He hasn't pitched in a couple of weeks. He was, maybe the best closer in the league last year, not named Landon Sims or Kevin Kopps, and those guys had seasons for the ages. He kind of got lost, but he was great in that role. He's got an oblique issue, and they're going to hold him out. It sounds like a while longer. But speaking of surprises, go ahead. I'm sorry, William.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, that's one of those guys. You look at pretty much every preseason All-American list. He was like the top reliever on everybody's list. So getting him is just kind of another feather in the cap for a pretty deep pitching staff.
Yeah. I think they'll be fine. Here's another couple teams it's hard to know what to make of right now. Florida and LSU. Florida wins the game on Friday night because Florida apparently just going to win anytime Hunter Barco pitches this year. And LSU comes back, wins 16-4 on Saturday, and then 11-2 on Sunday. And I think the most surprising part of that is LSU's pitching has suddenly turned around a little bit. I'm going to see if I can find it, but LSU has got, I would not have guessed this, base runners allowed per innings pitched. Tennessee 0.93, Vandy 1.17, LSU 1.29. I mean, would you have thought that? Yeah, it's crazy. That team all of a sudden, I mean, and that's with Blake Money having been a little bit banged up. I don't know exactly how they're doing it right now, but I mean, the bats are going to be there, and it just that A&M series just I think threw me and everybody off because they darn near got swept. And then you go into Gainesville, you get it, stuffed to you by Barco, and then you come back in games 2 and 3. And that raises some questions to me about Florida that we'll hit in a minute. But LSU had an awfully good get-right weekend there.
Yeah, 4 games through SEC play. They've got a home series loss to A&M and didn't look great against Barco. It looks a little rough. And then responded about as well as they could have. Like we mentioned, I think 27 runs over 2 games, which that's still really impressive and really good, but that's not unexpected from this offense. But getting the pitching and maybe more than that, the defense to just play clean baseball behind them. I think that's the most encouraging part out of that. Hilliard looked really good. Dutton on Sunday, I believe that might have been his first start. Looked really good. I mean, if LSU can get that, that's on the road against a top 10 team, dominating the last 2 games of the series to win. That's kind of the ceiling we thought they may have coming into the year. It remains to be seen if they can consistently do that. Because I don't think if you followed LSU the past couple of years, some of those midweek games get a little sideways. So I think there might still be some sloppiness that still needs to be ironed out. I don't think it's totally fixed yet, but it's definitely an encouraging sign. And it just seems like every day in the lineup, it's a different guy that's beating you. So I think it's an encouraging bounce back. They'll get Auburn at home. So it's kind of one of those that, do you hold serve there?
That'll be a fascinating series.
Business at home.
Yeah.
So it's, kind of like we talked about with a couple of other teams, can you be consistent? Can you do it, 2 weekends in a row as opposed to, just the one?
Well, and I feel like they're getting what you thought they'd get out of Dylan Cruz and Cade Doty. Trey Morgan hasn't quite gotten there yet, but Braden Jobert his bat's really come on. Jordan Thompson's hit for them at times. They're better in the catcher spot this year than they were. Of course, Jacob Berry. I mean, I think this is going to end up being, with apologies to Tennessee, probably the league's best offensive lineup, because I'm really more sold right now on LSU's lineup, I think, than I am Ole Miss's.
Yeah, agreed. Tennessee's produced the most so far. Part of that is schedule, but I still like LSU's probably a little bit better. At the end of the year, Tennessee's may stack up a little bit better on paper, but man, that LSU lineup, it's really deep. It's so talented. Like I said, that's what we expected out of them, and we'll see if kind of the book on them so far has been kind of similar to Arizona last year, where Jay Johnson came from. That they don't play a lot of clean baseball. The defense and pitching isn't great, but they can hit enough to get by. So, I don't think they have to be leading the SEC in fielding percentage and top 3 in ERA to be good, but they can't be last in those two. So we'll kind of see how much they can clean up and how consistent they can be there.
I am worried about Florida's starting pitching depth, because Sproat had that great summer, but you always wonder till you see him do it in college. A bad start this week. Barco's been great, but after that, Timmy Manning got kicked out of the rotation, didn't pitch well in relief. Now, Blake Purnell and Nick Ficarata have been doing a great job cleaning up some messes, but our concern for Florida was a little bit of pitching depth behind Barco. We wanted to see it proven, and I don't think this weekend made you feel any better.
Yeah, Sproat's been one of those guys. He's shown some stuff. I think it was
he was
Miami
player of the week a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was the Miami series where they lose the game with Barco, and then you're just kind of like, uh-oh. And they find a way to win the series. So there's been flashes of it, but again, that kind of feels like that's been the story on Florida the past couple of years, is like, it's Florida. They've got talented arms, but at some point you got to prove it. And Barco certainly has, but you need more than one. So will some of those guys step up? They looked good against Alabama on the road the weekend before. They had the series win against Miami, but the grind of the SEC is, can they do that consistently, or is there going to be some rear its head where the staff doesn't look good and they're giving up 26 runs in 2 games or whatever it was to LSU?
Now here's another stat.
I think LSU's probably an offense.
Yeah.
LSU's probably an offense that compounds that issue a little bit, but it's not like they're the only good offense. You're going to see a handful that are going to do that this year.
Well, and they had, what was it, Auburn last weekend? I've already forgotten. I'll look it up.
Florida, they had Bama.
Okay, well, so they got a break last week, because Alabama's is not one of the better offenses in the league, but Florida's got the lowest strikeout rate in the league by their pitchers this year. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's not something you're used to hearing from a Florida staff.
No.
Which I know we don't want to get into next week too much, but we'll just go ahead and point out that Thursday night they're have 2 Thursday through Saturday series, but one of them is Florida, Georgia. So we will get Thursday night Cannon Barco primetime on ESPNU.
That'll be a pitching matchup of the year.
That's about as good as it gets. So, yeah, that'll be a really good one. So just want to make sure we're already pumping that one up.
Well, since I mentioned Auburn, let's go ahead and throw them out there. That team just keeps hitting and hitting and hitting, and got a big one this weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did. That was one coming in that it felt like maybe the biggest toss-up of the weekend. 2 teams who, again, haven't been very consistent. You've seen flashes of it with A&M winning in Baton Rouge. Auburn has looked good. They went out to Globe Life and looked good, and then looked good through most of the non-conference, and then they lose 2 in a row. So it's like you don't really know what you're getting. But I was pretty impressed with Auburn this weekend. You go on the road, first 2 games of the series go to extra innings. The Sunday game was just a back and forth affair where they grind out a series win on the road. That was that's not easy to do. So I thought that was pretty encouraging and pretty impressive. And then if you were just a neutral observer, that was a great series. Like I said, 2 of them go into extra innings, and the third one, I don't know how many lead changes there were, but it felt like one every half inning, and it was just back and forth. Kind of what you expect. Sunday pitching wasn't all that great, But Auburn found a way to get a win on the road.
Auburn, to me, is probably the biggest surprise team in the league so far. I think this team is legit middle of the league. Looks like getting a regional team, and who knows, with a break or two, maybe you see this team in the hosting conversation at season. And it seems awfully premature to be saying things like that. And that series at LSU this weekend, I think will tell us some things. But I think Auburn's a team to me that so far looks legit.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see. Against Ole Miss last weekend, they or the Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They lose Thursday, then they come back and just pound Ole Miss. I think they had 19 runs on that Saturday game. And then going into the rubber game, it was like, okay, is this one of those where Auburn kind of makes a statement at home? They didn't. They got roughed up pretty well by the Ole Miss bats. But again, that's a really good offense. And it feels like a really similar scenario here going to LSU. LSU's not unbeatable. We've shown that they can have down weekends. They can kind of kick it around. So does Auburn go in there and take advantage of that? And that's kind of one of those that if you are going to take that step, that's a series you need to win. So I think that'll be really intriguing and probably one of those that's a little bit better than people maybe you're expecting.
What do we take away from A&M? Because that's been a confusing team to decipher after 2 weekends.
It has.
And frankly, they did not have a good run up to the SEC schedule.
Yeah, I still think there's some missing pieces there, but they keep grinding it out. They do kind of have some arms there. Micah Dallas kind of went
good.
He gave up four early and then really settled in, strikes out 10 and goes 7. There's not a lot of guys, especially this year, it feels like, that are going to give up 4 runs in the first, inning and a third or whatever it was, and then kind of settle in like he did. I think that's an experienced guy, the Texas Tech transfer. I think he's really good. I think they've got the pieces, but it just kind of feels like one of those where there's going to be a lot of close games, and they might be on the losing end of a lot of those. Granted, we said the same thing going into LSU, and they take 2 or 3 at Alex Fox. But so anything can happen. But it does feel like one of those where they really needed to win this series because they've got a pretty favorable stretch to start the year. They had a chance where I think it was after they beat LSU, you look up and it's like there's a chance they can win their first 4 series of the year. They obviously don't win the one against Auburn, but they still got some chances. I don't think they're a bad team by any means, but it's just one of those where there's so much depth in the league. It feels like they might get beat up a little bit, but we'll see.
One of the other things that surprised me a little bit this weekend too was Missouri. Missouri was really competitive against Arkansas. Took a game and could have easily taken 2. The computers love this team. I mean, they're NCAA regional caliber team according to a lot of the computer ratings out there, and I think is it this morning or what, top 20 in the RPI maybe? I'll look that up as we're speaking here. But yeah, Missouri, Josh Day has really hit well for them. The pitching's gotten better. They've got their lineup. In the past, you might have a couple guys to watch, and then really from 5 down, doesn't matter. Yeah. This year, they've got some guy like Carlos Pena is going to be one of the better freshmen in this league. They have got some guys in that lineup, William, who can hit a little bit. Their starting pitching's gotten a little better. They got a couple of good arms. Now, I still think they're probably 14 in this league. But the computers right now don't think they are, and I think it's going to be. Starting with Arkansas and Vandy. If that doesn't kill your confidence, it's going to make you better.
Yeah, that's one of those. I think Arkansas is probably just give us 2 and let's get out of here. Because that's one of the things. Missouri, the past couple of years, they seem to. I think it was last year they take one from State. 2019 they took one from Ole Miss. It's like. They'll get somebody every year.
Yeah.
But I'm with you there. I still think I probably have them 14, but it feels like that gap is a lot closer than it's been in the past couple of years. And that's a program that's had a pretty good pitching staff.
Yeah.
They've churned out some talent. it's easy to look at them and just see them finishing towards the bottom of the league and assume there's nothing there. But they've had some talent in years past, and like you mentioned, now that the offense seems to kind of be picking up a little bit, I think that's not necessarily the team you just kind of expect to roll over and get an easy 3 against, like some people expect.
I think if you're Arkansas, you've got to be, I don't know what the word is, because if I say thrilled with where you are, people are going to look at me funny. But here's what I mean. Their pitching, they've arguably had the third best staff in the league so far, which is where people thought they'd have problems. Everybody looked at this and said Robert Moore and Caden Wallace and Brady Slavens and all those guys. No, those guys haven't been at the top of the conference leaderboard like you would have thought they would have been. Instead, you've got Michael Turner, who's had a tremendous year behind the plate, Chris Lanzilli, the transfer from Wake. I mean, Arkansas, I think right now Arkansas is the third best team in the league because I think their pitching's been really good. But just the script is nothing like what it is. And I think if you're Arkansas, you're sitting there going, wait a minute. Where we had the questions, it's working out for us. And the guys we knew we could count on, that's not where it's come. So I think they're a fascinating team to watch too.
Yeah, we hear about, basketball players that, will score a quiet 25.
Yeah.
It feels like Arkansas is a very quiet 18-4. They don't feel like they've hit doesn't feel like they've hit their peak yet. Because like you mentioned, we know some of those guys in that offense have another gear. And if they hit that, okay, then they're on par with, Tennessee or what they were last year. And Wiggins on Sunday, that's a guy you knew he had really good stuff, but it's like, can he put it together? Can he consistently do it? He's pitching into the 8th inning on Sunday.
Yeah.
There's not, we talked about how Tennessee's rotation is really deep and how impressive that is. There's not a lot of teams that can do that. Even, some of the guys that have the best Sunday guys in the league, they're not pitching into the 8th inning. And that's all after, I feel like the margin of error really shrunk after Peyton Pallette went down with Tommy John. So, that makes Wiggins stepping up even bigger. And then you've got, the freshman, Hagen Smith, really, really good. And then Nolan, you kind of knew what you had with him, wanted to see him be a little bit more consistent. I think he's really good. Maybe not, your headline Friday guy that's going to put up the jaw-dropping lines like some of the other guys in the league, but, he's just a consistent rock there for them. And I think they do have one of the best pitching staffs in the conference, if not the country.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on it there. I think one thing that's really underrated is when you have guys that can go deep into games. They've got 3, and really the only team that's doing what they're doing with that right now is Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those. If Tennessee's not just leading every possible category, there's probably a lot more people talking about Arkansas.
Right.
And the thing is, it's not one of those where it's like, oh, they've got to have their 3 starters go to the set. Like they've got a good bullpen, they've got depth. And after how last year went, where they kind of had the target on their back all year long, Arkansas fans love that. There was a lot of really great baseball, and that was a pretty historic run. But you also saw them kind of run out of gas there at the end, run into a hot NC State team in the postseason, and just kind of all that comes with that. So the Razorbacks, they might be kind of okay with let Tennessee be, in the spotlight the entire year, and we'll just gradually cruise on, winning games, winning series. I think they may be okay with that.
Here's another one that surprised me. I did not expect Kentucky just to blast Georgia the way it did. I'm starting to be concerned about Georgia's pitching depth. I really am. But let's talk Kentucky first. Chase Eastep is having a Player of the Year type year. Darren Williams has been great for them in terms of pitching. Cole Stupp has not carried them the way that they hope, but Tyler Bosma has been pretty good. Was good this weekend. Kentucky's really got some pieces here.
Yeah, they really have. They actually announced, I think it was yesterday. He's done for the year, so that's a blow for them.
I did not hear that.
It's just another guy that goes down that you hate to see. But like you mentioned, it's not like he had been a Barco or Cannon type guy to this point that, that's the only reason they're having success. That offense it's the real deal.
Well, if he's been pitching through an injury, that explains the performance.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does because he was one of the better guys. I think he was on one of our
Hmm.
all SEC teams coming into the year. So you hate that for him, but I do. It's one of those. I picked Georgia going into that weekend, but that's kind of one of those. TCU went into Lexington, lost the series. Now Kentucky takes a series from Georgia, so they've got two. They're 17-8 with two series wins against top 20 teams. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, that lineup, man, I don't think you want to pitch those guys. Daniel Harris had another home run this weekend. Rubalcaba's hit for
Mhm.
them some behind the plate. Plastiak's striking out a ton, but he's mashing when he's not. Ryan Ritter's been
Yeah.
better. Um,
Yeah, Ritter. I don't know if you saw the play he had it short
mhm.
over the weekend, but that he might be the best defensive shortstop in the league. He's one of those guys I really like watching play. And then you mentioned Estep. If he had the Arkansas A or the
Yeah,
LSU or one of those logos, he's probably getting a lot more love nationally
yeah.
because that's a guy that's raking.
This is kind of the year where a lot of those fourth and fifth year guys are really taking advantage of that because I think he's a senior, isn't he?
I think that's right. Yeah, and it feels like one of those that yeah, they might not play the cleanest, prettiest, 4-3 games on a Friday night and all of that, but I think they're content with just getting up there and mashing. And I feel like that's kind of their mo. And again, I feel like they might sneak up on some teams, which if they keep winning top 15, top 20 series, I don't know how
Yeah.
much sneaking they do. I think they've got Ole Miss coming up, so that's a that's a big opportunity, and that's an Ole Miss pitching staff that's kind of struggled. So if you had to pick when to get them, it might be this weekend. So that's one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think the league is a whole lot more muddled this year than I thought it would be. Like
Yeah.
I feel like the top three teams probably in this order: Tennessee, Vandy, Arkansas, and then that next tier. You've got LSU, Florida, um, Ole Miss is in there. Auburn might be in there. I'm not as big on Georgia yet as the computers. And I was high on Georgia coming into the year, but I have some questions about that pitching staff now. Mississippi State is
Yeah,
kind
I
of a
think.
wild card, but I mean, it's like
Mhm.
4-14. Heck, and even 2-14 because Carolina beat Vandy this weekend. I think it's I don't think you have like an awful team in this league, and I think it's probably too early to be concerned that like some of the great teams might just be good, but I think it's a possibility. I
Mhm.
just think it's setting up, William, is like these series just about every week, and anytime anybody plays anybody, it's got a chance to be something.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be great for us. We're gonna get a lot of
Yeah.
competitive baseball. But when you go back and listen to our preseason stuff, I mean, we were pretty much saying like, yeah, there's kind of a clear separation between, the top, the middle, and the bottom, and
Yeah.
it's been the exact opposite of that. We are seeing a little bit, a lot of teams taking series, teams like Kentucky and Auburn that are maybe exceeding expectations. Teams like State and Georgia that are probably not as good as we thought they were. So there's a lot going on there, and like I said, I think that's great for your average viewer because there's going to be a lot of good baseball and a lot of, probably a lot of games you're going to flip on late and be like, wow, didn't expect to see that.
Yeah, with Georgia, it's like Jonathan Cannon has just been unhittable. But boy, after
Hmm.
that, I mean, I don't know who's pitching well for them. Jaden Woods has kind of been disappointing, and I think that'll straighten out. But we thought they'd have all these arms. Luke Wagner, I think, was in there. I don't think he was very good this weekend. Of course, they've had an injury or two already. Ross is done for the year. I don't know. Garrett Brown wasn't good this weekend. It's not the Georgia team I
Yeah, I
thought we'd
know.
see.
Yeah, it's kind of we thought they were going to kind of hang their hat on the pitching staff, and the offense wasn't going to have to do a ton because they're going to be pretty consistent across the board, and that's just after Cannon. That's not what we've seen. I think they've given up 28 runs, or excuse me, 38 runs in their two Sunday games in the SEC so far. So I mean, that's just uh, they're going to have to fix some of that before you feel super confident in them moving forward.
Georgia's given up 61 runs in 6 SEC games. Now also scored 43. I think people dogged their offense. I said, well, you know, they've got a lot of kids back, and that's when guys pop. And, you know, Corey Collins has had a nice year. Ben Anderson's been unbelievable after he couldn't hit anything.
Yeah, he's been on tear.
So it's kind of like it's that inverse Arkansas, right? Georgia's the team that's hitting that we didn't know for sure if it would hit, and we thought for sure it would pitch, and it's yeah. So.
Which I still think there's some talent there, and there's some pieces there. You mentioned Woods. I think I saw on Twitter he's going to get a start this weekend, so we'll see how that goes. I mean, I think he's pretty solid. I think you'll see him kind of settle in a little bit because I think he's got the stuff. And it's one of those that, you know, depending on where they're at in postseason and how that goes. I mean, you feel like if you've got Cannon and, you know, you're one other guy away from from having all you need, really. So that's we'll need to see them prove it a little bit more, but I think there are some pieces there that probably should be performing a little bit better than they are.
Now takes us to the most confusing team in the league, and I don't even have to say it. I'll just let you take it from here because you know exactly where I'm going next.
You're going to start full?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's two schools of thought.
you can't even come up with the words.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think they're pretty good. Let me be honest. I think they're a little better than their record's been. I like their lineup. I think they got a couple of good starting pitchers. Results have just been all over the place.
Yeah, I think there's similar to how we talked about with Arkansas. It's not really the core guys that you expected producing that are necessarily the guys doing the damage. So you feel good that, you know, it's the new guys, you know, the freshman Hines, Kellum Clark, who came on late last year, but, you know, wasn't a full-time guy all year. Brad Cumbest is gone. You know, he's given up football. He's baseball only, and he's made some strides. So you're seeing some guys that have made that jump. And then if you get the Logan Tanners, the Cam James, the Luke Hancocks to kind of hit their stride that you feel really good about, but man, they just the bullpen. I don't know if you have a single arm you feel all that confident in.
Wow, which is crazy after a year ago.
Yeah, that was what they hung their hat on and how they made the Omaha run all to death. Obviously, you know, you've got injuries there that contribute to that with Sims, and then, you know, the closer Simmons. I've also got Casey Hunt, who was in the rotation to start the year, hasn't pitched since that first weekend. So I think they're expecting to get him back, but haven't heard much on that. He's one of those, you know, if he comes back, they're probably going to start him in the bullpen because the starting pitching hasn't been bad. It feels a little hit or miss. Preston Johnson is their Friday guy now. He's good. Feels like he's going to probably have a lot of good outings that, you know, tough luck losses because what they're starting to do with these starters is they know the bullpen isn't great. So they feel the need to extend the starters one more time through the order, and those guys are kind of getting burned a little bit. Cade Smith, the Sunday guy, has been really good for a Sunday starter. But again, you know, your Sunday starter into the weekend, you already depleted bullpen, you don't have a ton of faith in, kind of gets extended further. Jackson Fristow is a guy that they expected a lot. I mean, he was in the rotation last year to begin the year as a freshman. You know, he was up to 97 this weekend, but I think he gave up. He got a win this weekend, but he gave up, I think, 3 runs in the ninth. They score 4 in the bottom half, and he gets the win. But yeah, I think they are better than that record indicates. But I think they're going to run into a lot of issues in league play if they don't figure out the bullpen.
Well, I'm watching them the other night. They're closing it out against Alabama. I mean, like, they got all these arms. You know, we've talked Fristow, Cam Tuller has been the end-game guy for a bit. State's not hurting for returning arms, and you look up and there's Brooks Auger closing and doing pretty well, by the way.
Yeah, he looks pretty good. So it's one of those that I think they've got the talent. It's just a matter of, like, who steps up and can do it. Kind of avoided disaster this weekend with that offense. Just, you know, I can't remember how many runs it was they scored in the ninth inning of those first 2 games. but they've got some pieces there. Maybe when they get Casey Hunt back, they didn't know who the rotation was going to be. So it's not like he was just a guy that got thrown in that rotation by default. That was one of those that he kind of went out and earned that job. So they're really high on him. So if they get him back, that's another guy. And again, if the offense gets going, it doesn't feel like they really have to be like they were last year. It's like the top bullpen in the league or anything. They just need to be serviceable, and so far they haven't been. But another thing that I think is pretty interesting, they play pretty good defense, which is something they desperately need because you can't be giving away outs with a struggling pitching staff. Last year they were not great defensively until the postseason run, which was really good. But they've had a couple of defensive plays that have kind of come back to bite them. I think we talked about this offline. They've got 2 pop-ups, one against Tulane and one against Georgia, that if they, one of them scored 2 runs on a sac fly, one of them fell with 2 outs with the bases loaded that scored 3, that if they play those 2 balls a little bit better, they're probably looking at road series wins at Tulane and at Georgia, and we think about them a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So I think the opportunities are there. The talent is there, but it's, does somebody in the bullpen step up, I think is what it ultimately boils down to.
Boy, the remaining schedule, though. Arkansas on the road this weekend, home against LSU after LSU looked better. Auburn at home. I mean, Auburn's not going to be an easy out. Then at Ole Miss, at Missouri, Florida, at A&M, and then Tennessee to close. There's no breaks in here for them now.
Yeah, there's really not. And that's one of the things that, that losing those early season games really gets you is, you can't just, follow the conventional wisdom of don't get swept on the road, win 2 out of 3 at home and you're good. You can't really follow that after you've kind of, you're going to need to win some road series. You're going to need to get a sweep here or there. And you got to avoid the letdown weekends and stuff like that if you're them. So be interesting to see. I think that coaching staff, they seem to always kind of press the right buttons to where they are peaking at the end of the year. We'll see if they do it again this year. It feels like this is one of those that would, be a really good coaching job if they do.
Yeah, it's a little more of a challenge than it was a year ago. But I want to ask you next what you made of Alabama, because you watched a lot of them this weekend.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed. The bullpen, similar to State, they're kicking themselves saying, if we don't give up a 3 and 4 run leads at the end of games, we win that series.
Yeah,
at least win that series, if not sweep that series and start full. They've got some pieces. I was pretty impressed. I think Grayson hit. The Sunday guy looked really good. Oftentimes you see those by Sunday. Guys are the totals are getting up there, and he seemed to have that State lineup off balance all day after they'd had a lot of success already on the weekend. I was really impressed with him. Drew Williamson hit a ball a long way in that Sunday game. And I was just impressed. They did this, similar to what they did last weekend against Florida. 2 tough losses Friday and Saturday, but then they battle through close games Sunday that they find a way to win. There's some pieces there, and they've got talent. Denton, I think, is really, really good. I know we had him on one of our All SEC preseason teams. I was impressed with him this weekend. But it's kind of one of those. I think I said this last year. I was like, they're going to get somebody. It feels like just in an SEC series that somebody's going to expect them to just lay down and they're going to get an easy series win. And I think they've got too much talent for that. They've pitched it well all year, kind of similar to what you saw against Texas. They go out there and you look at it on paper and it's like, oh yeah, well they got swept. Well, that series is a lot closer than you think.
Yeah.
So it's similar to what we talked about with State. That the schedule doesn't do them any favors, but that's just the grind of the SEC. That's nothing new to those guys. It's been that way every year. But encouraging. I think there's definitely things to take away from to feel good about from that lineup.
I think we've hit every team.
I think we might have. Let's see.
That went by quickly.
Yep.
Anything we didn't get to coming out of the weekend, whether it was, of course, you had the bat controversy at Auburn. You mentioned the injury to Cole Stupp. I would have loved to have seen Cole Stupp healthy and pitching the way he could. Because then I think Kentucky's probably a regional team, knowing what we know about them. But any loose ends we didn't get to there?
I'm with you on stuff. I think that lineup has a lot of talent. They were similar last year, where man they had some guys that were really fun to watch, and they put up a lot of runs. But just didn't win as many games as they needed to. Would have loved to have seen him. But one of the things, Tennessee. So they come into the year, they're red hot. They had the big weekend in Houston, and then a couple of weeks off, and then now they've got the big weekend in Oxford. Well, they don't get a week off after this. They get arguably bigger series, in-state rival, Vandy, all of that, and they're going on the road again. So how do they fare? How do they respond? At this point, there's no reason to think that they're not gonna be up to that task, but I think it's interesting to say the least, to see how they respond. And some of those freshmen who this is the first time that they've had to go back to back to where you're top 5 team, top 10 team. There are no breaks. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. And then Vandy at the same time is coming off a disappointing weekend, so I'm sure Corbs will have those guys focused. So it feels like your kind of prototypical trap game, if you will. I don't know if you have a trap game between top 10 teams and in-state rivals, but that should be a really good scene. And then one other thing I actually wanted to note is I know people poke fun on Twitter at Florida a lot for having such a good team and some lackadaisical crowds. They set their school record crowd over the weekend, which was, I've got it written down, it was 8,306. So that's over 2,000 more than they ever had at McKeithen. I actually noticed it on the broadcast. They were just, LSU got up, and that was the one they won 16-4. So they didn't have a lot to cheer about. But they stayed most of the game. They pan over. They've got those new berms, down the left field and right field lines. And it was just absolutely packed. And it was weather-wise, it was a really good night. So I thought that was really encouraging to see. And, if we're going to poke fun at Florida when they don't show up, you got to give them credit when they do. 8,000 people. That's 8,306. That's a lot. That's I looked it up. That's more than South Carolina's ever had. So that tops their record, which is something I would not have guessed at all that we would be seeing from Florida this year. So I know there's some people put a little bit too much stock in attendance, but for a sport that that we like and we want to see growing, it's good to see fan bases like Florida, fan bases like Tennessee that are setting those attendance records and showing up in droves like they haven't necessarily done in years past. So I thought that was a cool little nugget.
Well, I think I heard most of that. I had a daughter banging on my office door telling me it's dinner time, and I was forgetting I was on. I'm frantically saying, "Stop it!" You think
I did notice that.
You think when your child looks through a glass door and sees your equipment set up, and you'd think that would tell them, but apparently not. My daughter's brighter than that. I'll just leave it at that. But anyway, she thinks she's the house mother at times.
Well, you're a better man than me because the dinner bell ringing is normally my cue.
Yeah.
Glad we're wrapping up.
Yeah, fortunately my wife can cook, so we're good there. But hey,
there you go.
Good night for you and I tomorrow night. You and I, coincidentally, are both going to be in the state of Tennessee watching separate college baseball games at minor league parks involving two different SEC teams. I'll be at the Nashville Sounds Park at, good grief, it's First Horizon now, formerly First Tennessee, and you're at good grief, what's the name of the one in Memphis?
AutoZone. So this is the first one I've gotten to go to. First one I've gotten to go to this year. So I know we were planning on what day we were going to do a pod, and I suggested Tuesday, and then I was like, wait a minute, I'm going to a game.
You will not infringe on my baseball watching like that.
Yeah. So I'm excited. They're playing. I know State and Ole Miss both kind of do it. They'll come up to Memphis and play at AutoZone on a weeknight. I think they kind of alternate years that they do it and things like that. I know this is the first time State's done it in a while, so excited. Should be some good weather. And speaking of the state of Tennessee, we've seen it before with the state of Mississippi and LSU and Arkansas, but so far Tennessee has kind of been the baseball capital of the world through this season, and they're going to do it again. They'll have the big game this weekend. So that should be a lot of fun.
I will be at 2 of 3 of those. I'm not going to make Friday. My son has got a doubleheader. It's his first games of the year, and I don't want to miss that. I'll be.
Oh yeah, can't miss those.
I'll be following it from Game Tracker or whatever, but I will be in the house for Vandy, Tennessee this weekend, and that'll be electric.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. I've been working on, because everybody wants to see the growth of college baseball and everything, so working on a little graphic highlighting each team's attendance record and when it was set, because there's a lot of them that are really recent. So I think that's a really cool development.
Yeah.
And was working on it yesterday. I was like, let's hold off for a week because I have a feeling we might get a new one in Nashville over the weekend.
Yeah. Well, it'll be fun. I think we're going to do some Twitter Space stuff probably
I believe
this week.
So. We talked about that Thursday night with Georgia, Florida.
Yeah.
I think the LSU Auburn game is also, that series is getting started on Thursday. So I know Blake has done some for basketball, so we'll try to take some pointers from him. I think that's got a fun way to do it. It's pretty much just, if you're unfamiliar, it's pretty much like a live podcast.
Yeah.
And Chris will be chatting through some things. First one, so we'll see how it goes. But we can do that, and then people can, request to speak, and we can get some questions, and we'll hopefully all be watching some baseball and then chatting about what we're seeing on the screen, as well as maybe previewing some upcoming stuff. So good time to just, talk through some things and have some fun. We hope that's a fun thing we can kind of bring out every Thursday night. So I'm excited. I think it'll be fun.
Maybe my kids won't be banging down my office door that night, but you just never know.
Hey,
I still can't get over that. I'm like, can you not see? But anyway.
Twitter Spaces are pretty informal, so we should be good there. I know.
Yeah.
Well, one of Blake's basketball ones, there was a guy that chimed in with a question from the shower. So we won't go that far with it, but it's casual. We'll let you do whatever as long as
we didn't get a pet interruption either tonight, but I'm sure that's just coming down the pike. So.
Yeah, we'll let Oreo in for this Twitter Space.
Yeah, Oreo I could hear him running around outside and barking at things. I don't know if that made it to the audio or not, but in any case, hey William, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for joining us. As I smacked the microphone inadvertently, but can't wait for Twitter Spaces. It'll be fun. Again, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and we'll see you later again in a week.